Welcome to Cut the Bull, an insightful podcast which addresses the news of the day and the cultural issues plaguing our society, bringing logic and context to these topics and discussing solutions too real for mainstream pundits. Now, here are your hosts, Charles Love, Shamika Michelle, and Wilfred Riley.
Hello and welcome to Cut the Bull. I am Charles Love alongside my co-hosts, Shamika Michelle and Wilfred Riley. And our guest this week is Noah Smith. He is an economics blogger who runs the substack Noahpinion. Noah, welcome to the show.
Thanks for having me on.
Well, it's good to have you. And we're not ironically going to start off with an economics question, even though we may end up there. These conversations kind of meander sometimes. But I was told you have a really interesting, logical, but not often voiced opinion on all of the wokeness and the complaints that we're hearing culturally now.
Can somebody help me with my ring light? Oh, sorry.
What'd you say? You talking to me?
Sorry.
There's a mute button, and if you
Yes, you got it.
No, but if you that the take was that they're not wrong about everything that they complain about, but I think they're wrong on some. But even where they're not wrong, they take their reactions to these radically extreme places, and that's where you notice that there was a big problem in how they were addressing these. So talk about that a bit.
Right. I guess I first started to notice that something was kind of going wrong. I think it was 2015. There was this thing at the Boston MFA Museum where they had kimono night, right? And I lived in Japan. I like Japanese cultural stuff. I thought that was pretty cool. They hired these they bought these kimonos or rented from these kimono makers, who are these nice like old Japanese ladies who make kimonos for a living. And then they had them at this kimono night and they had people try them on to come in, and I thought that was cool. And then a whole bunch of people got mad, and so all these kids, by my count, I think none of them were Japanese or Japanese American, but they got really mad. Woke kids got really mad because they said this was cultural appropriation. White people shouldn't be allowed to wear traditional Japanese clothing, and they protested kimono night at the museum, and then the saying it was cultural appropriation, and then the Japanese people who actually made the kimonos counter protested. They came out and said, no, let people wear the kimonos. This is how we make our living. This is we sell these things. You let people wear the damn kimonos. And then I guess I don't know how that was eventually resolved. I think I don't know whether they canceled kimono night or not, but that was the first thing that sort of told me that something was wrong there, right? And something was going weird with this cultural moment that we were in.
And the odd thing about it is, it's not like they went to Kmart. Does that even exist? Am I aging myself? It's not like they went to Kmart to buy them, right? They were authentic, and they were buying them from people who were okay with selling them to them. They had to expect they were going to wear them, right? But they didn't care. They just cared about their beliefs on this, and it goes to, Will, what we often hear is the people arguing, protesting, and defending these situations are never part of the class, right? They're speaking for everyone else, and that tends to be what he saw in 15, got supersized in 2020.
Right, that's right, and it got mainstreamed, and I think, yeah, we could see it coming for years if you were in those circles, if you were at universities, or if you were just on Twitter in these political discussions. And then 2020 is when it really got mainstreamed. It's when the languages and the ideas that had been developed throughout elite spaces kind of boiled over, and then suddenly everyone was using these things, like using various woke terms, and it just got mainstream. And that's normal, like the things always go from like the small communities to the big nation. Right. But now I think everyone's sort of aware of it, and a lot of the discussions that have been happening in the last couple of years are the same things, are just bigger repeats of what I saw, right, and what you guys probably saw as well in like 2015 or so, 2015, 2016.
Right. Shamika?
Yeah, no, I was just thinking of many of the Black Lives Matter rallies or marches
Mhm.
where it was mostly white people. I remember going to the Capitol here in North Carolina in Raleigh, and I was going to actually just see the Capitol because I had someone, a guest here from Virginia, and they wanted to go to the Capitol. We were the only Black people out there, and it was crazy because the rioters or marchers or whatever wouldn't even have a conversation with us. And so it was like, okay, we're here, we're Black. And it was like our Black life matters, but not our Black opinion. They would not even talk to us. It was like we didn't even exist. And even when we tried to engage them in conversation, it was like, oh, you don't know because you're Black and you're ignorant, you're stupid. So we're out here to help you because you don't know any better. And I've run into that so many times, especially in 2020, where it was like they were out there protesting and I would try to have a conversation, but because I was Black, no, they didn't want to talk to me because I wasn't on their side.
Well, they kind of had a point, Shamika. I mean, in their defense, the hashtag isn't Black Opinions Matter.
I
It's Black
mean,
Lives.
obviously.
And they're out there using their whiteness and their privilege to help you, and you got the nerve to start all this lip service. I mean, we're helping you. Just sit down and take the help. Will, your
Yeah.
thoughts?
Yeah, I mean, so first of all, in terms of what Shamika said, I think the ultimate example of that was in Minneapolis, which is very heavily a working class white city, where you had an actual riot and you had these mobs that were 70 or 80% white setting the Lake Street business district, which is a Black and Asian business district, on fire while chanting Black Lives Matter. And you had these minority merchants coming out with shotguns and trying to chase away these white criminals who kept chanting about Black lives. It was real through the looking glass shit. I still remember watching this on television. But I mean, I actually have a question, I guess, and I think both of you may have this written down as well, but kind of for Noah. I mean, so in your tweet thread, you said, if I remember it correctly, wokeness, this kind of stuff, the performative nonsense like kimono night and a lot of the solutions are just wrong and useless, but a lot of the problems that they identify are real. And I guess my question would be, what do you think those problems are? And with kind of a line of follow-up, like I actually wrote a book, Taboo, where I looked at a lot of the claims on the political left, like there's a massive amount of interracial crime. And it turned out among serious violent crime, I mean, about 3% of it took place between Blacks and whites. It's 80% Black on white. I mean, so like what police violence, similar data. I mean, 8 unarmed Black men, I believe, have been killed so far this year by police. You know, systemic racism we can debate, but that tends to break down to, you know, region, age, social class. So what are the problems that like the woke folk have identified?
Mm-hmm.
Right. Okay. So I think that the most important problem is not something that you can look at with statistics easily. I think it's a feeling, and I know that facts don't care about my feelings, but I think
That's
Or
not quite right.
Shamika also doesn't care about your feelings.
Shamika also does not care. So,
Much more savage than facts.
way more.
okay, so, but you know, and I think a lot of people felt that their society didn't respect them in the 2000s and early 2010s.
Mm-hmm.
A lot of people felt like they were living in a society that wasn't built for them, where they felt like an outsider for no obvious reason, you know, maybe because they're Asian, because they were, you know, women who got promoted to management, various reasons. I think people felt like they were living in a culture that didn't view them as sort of full, sort of central core people. You know, when you show up to a place, you can often tell whether or not you're one of the core people. You go to a frat party, right? And then you're like a nerdy geek who goes to a frat party at college. And then you show up and the frat guys and the sorority girls are there and they're partying, and you kind of, and maybe nobody says anything bad to you. Nobody you know, discriminates against you or tries to bully or kick you out or anything like that. People are happy to have you there, but you know that this isn't your space. You don't feel the sense of ownership. And that's fine because you didn't join a frat. You didn't decide to be part of that. But when it's your corporation or your university or your nonprofit or your government, civil service, whatever, or whatever organization you're in, or even just some like hobbyist thing like the Knitting Society or the Sci-Fi Authors, convention or whatever, like any of these spaces, which is just that's a word I do like that the woke people popularized, spaces, because it's general, it can mean any of these places or situations, right? And then so any of these spaces, there's no reason for people, there's no good reason for Americans to feel like they're excluded, or not excluded, like they're not part of the core group in any of these places, at work, at school, and yet people did. And I think that was, it was not anyone's fault. People talk about this sort of mysterious miasma of structural racism that's out there. I think some of that does exist, but I think that that's not fundamentally why this happened. Why this happened was because two things. Number one, our country became much more diverse. We went from a country that was 85% white to a country that was, in people like under 40, like 55% white within a generation. And yet, white guys would promote white guys at companies, not because, they have any sort of explicit like discrimination. If you ask them, are white guys better? They would say, no, I'm not racist. But then they just sort of naturally form a bond with people who are kind of like the guys they hung out with in college or whatever. And so there's this, there was this feeling of lack of respect. There was also the fact that women entered management and entered sort of, women had already entered the workforce at the low level in like the 80s, but then women in the 90s and the 2000s really entered management. They started working their way up, becoming like department heads and whatever. And so, a lot of the corporate culture had been formed around male bonding, not as a way to intentionally exclude women or because people thought, well, you women, you suck, you can't do the work, blah, blah, blah. But just because that's who you bond with. These bros bonded with other bros and did bro things. And then, and so suddenly the women management were here and they were feeling like I'm not really included. And that's real and that's important, and then people were looking around, but it's amorphous. It's not something you can point to in the statistics easily. You can point to, you can say, like, oh, these white male managers promoted other white male managers and things like that. And then you could say, well, maybe just because those were the good people who were good at their jobs. You never know. You can't pin it down with statistics. And so it's like this cloud of around you of not exclusion, but just non-inclusion, I guess. And you're just sort of, you don't know what to strike out at. You don't know what's doing this to you. You don't know what the problem is. It's like a cloud all around you. So you're punching this cloud. And I feel like a lot of the woke people came up with this idea of, they borrowed from academia, this idea of, structural racism, misogyny, white supremacy, and things like that. Those are academic theories. Those describe stuff that's probably a piece of what's going on in the world, but people use that idea to represent all of this cloud that they wanted to attack.
Okay.
That's
this is one of those times where I know Shamika and Will are going to be far more entertaining on this than me. So I'm just going to be simple and just get out of the way. So the part about it being a feeling, which I can understand why you said it, is kind of difficult because if it's a feeling, you can't really put your finger on it. So it makes it more difficult for somebody to have a conversation with them and say, well, where's this coming from? I understand what you're saying, but this. And then when you talk about the women, it also says, because I get the bros and you're not implicitly racist, but you're doing, those are the people around you, the people that look like you. But then you say when the women got into management, so in spite of that, somebody had to promote them to management because they got there.
right.
And then where people do look at you differently in these spaces, and that definitely happens, but that's in that space. The problem with what they're doing, they're making it everywhere. Last thing, I managed restaurants for years. And every place I went, I was the first Black manager they had. So I used to think it was funny. I go into, somebody would say, I want to speak to the manager. And I go over and say, excuse me, sir, you want to speak to the manager? They're like, yeah. And they look up and they kind of do a double take, like, they would say they just have to settle themselves. And be like, okay, this is what did I want again? Because it's a black guy and he's the manager, right? But I could say that he did that because I'm black, 100%. But what I can't do is say, see, this is what society's like, right? Because that's that one table in that one restaurant in that one city. And what they're doing is they're, taking this thing, which may be true, and they're making it this large macro thing that it's not. Shamika, you go first.
Well, I think I'm going to pass it to Will because I feel like what I'm hearing is that there are some people who are weak wusses, and the rest of us who are not have to pacify their bitch assness. I don't see how that makes sense at all. So let's go to the professor.
Well, for me, actually, I mean, I like Noah's writing, and I'm actually kind of sympathetic to what so basically, I think there are a lot of people that feel this way. I just don't necessarily think it's accurate. Mm-hmm. So I hear this all the time. I am, as Charles said, as Shamika is as well, I'm a black businessman. So you hear this all the time at meetings and so on. I just don't feel like this is designed for me. They're going to promote a white boy first. You hear this playing golf, so on. Mm-hmm. I don't really think that's statistically true. I mean, as a boss, and Charles can probably attest to this, the law is essentially proportional representation. Unless one group in your area is strikingly underqualified, you're going to get sued if everyone's not represented, at least in rough, 80% proportionality to what those people are in the area around you. So, I mean, every trading floor sales floor I've worked on, probably majority white guys, because we're still 65 or whatever percent white, but had kind of a United Nations feel to it. And I think if you go to a college classroom today, in terms of the number of women, certainly, for example, when Charles talks about the restaurant business, nightlife business, there may be a few exceptions, upper end accounting, but I think that's pretty standard. Mm-hmm. So when people say this wasn't built for me, I mean, I kind of do agree with Shamika on that. It's a very technical point. I'm here, and I'm probably about as likely to get promoted as a white guy. And although I'm in the minority, I'm proportional. I mean, remember, America's only 11 to 12% black without biracial people there. I just sometimes feel out of place. I think the frat party example is pretty good. We've all been in those situations where you feel a little bit awkward. The question is, what do you do about that? Nobody's being mean to you. You're being treated roughly like everybody else. Everyone, when I was in that sales floor world, everyone loved bringing female executives out to rowdy bars. It wasn't really expected they would hook up, but it was much better than that baboon pack environment with a bunch of dudes there just drinking beer, So, I mean, the question, what you're pointing out seems to be one of the inevitable downsides of diversity, just like eliminating groupthink is an inevitable upside of diversity. If you have any group that's less than 25% of a population, they're probably going to pack up a little bit. They're probably sometimes going to feel isolated. I think that's just a reality. I don't really think that there's massive discrimination, certainly in my academic world, against female professors or former businesswomen or something like that. So I think this might lead into the core of the conversation, but the question really is what to do about that. People have and one more kind of statistical point. I do think some of this, don't want to start just rattling off facts. I do think some of this is statistically measurable. So there's been a big discussion recently about, as you know, Noah, about whether black people are underrepresented in mainstream media and are presented badly in media. And a couple of people have started looking at this, and I was surprised by the results. But it turns out that if you go by commercials, for example, about 40% of all the people shown on television are black. About 15% are gay. And I mean, I personally have some opinions about how black masculinity is presented. But I mean, you white guys get it even worse on TV. I mean, every dad's a fucking moron that can't open a can of soup. But I mean, anywho, but so there was this argument, black people are underrepresented. We're only about a third of the people in ads. And people looked at it and said, well, no, it's about 40%, and you're only 10% of the country. So I think this comes up pretty quickly where that is measurable. There is that miasmatic feeling. There's what any minority feels. Then you look at it and you see, okay, there's still a fair amount of white racists, but people are really making these efforts on both sides. The question becomes, I guess, and Charles and Shamika are probably gonna have some comments here, but what do you do about that? People sometimes feel vaguely ill at ease. Do you reshape all of society around that? That's That's really when you get into DEI and cultural appropriation and so on, the question you're going to be facing. Like I sometimes feel vaguely ill at ease. I feel vaguely ill at ease in a power broker meeting later today. I'm going to be the littlest guy there. That doesn't mean so what.
Exactly.
And no, let me give you a real quick setup too, because I want to just set the tone to be clear that you weren't saying you felt like that. You're just saying you know people felt like that and you understand why they do. And then another point going from the
I was saying I'll be nervous.
From the restaurant thing too. So I'll give you one example. I'm in a D because you talk about Will wanted to go to what do we do? I'm in a corporate meeting, fast forward after the restaurant now, mostly middle management and senior management. Everybody on the call is management. I don't know, 30 people on the call. And they're talking about diversity. And I am literally the only Black man there, right? But with women and other minorities and immigrants or whatever, there's one non-minority on the call. So they're talking about what they need to do to increase diversity, right? But there's one white man in the room. You got your diversity, but they're talking about how do we improve it. And that's kind of what you have a problem with when you get to relate to, they may be right that there's a problem, but what they're doing. So talk about solutions, as Will say, or should we be solving it?
Me?
Yeah, you.
Oh, sorry.
If I could say one
okay.
thing, there might also
Will
be an
wants to say
intermediate
one quick
question.
thing first.
Yeah. Right. Okay. So I think
Will wanted to say something quick. What?
Oh yeah.
There might also be an intermediate question, which is like, so what are the woke solutions and why are they wrong? I think that's another piece you guys might want to look at.
Well, maybe we should even go back further, because Will asked you initially when you broke down what they think and why you agree that there are some problems, but you never really were able to say, okay, these are the things that I think are a problem. So what problems do they get right? How about that?
Right. So the problems that they get right are that America is an extraordinarily disrespectful society. We are a society that has not learned, and you realize this living in Japan, but you also realize this living in Canada, that we have not, we had so much room to spread out. We could just move to wherever we wanted, and we could just like be in whatever club we wanted, and we didn't encounter everybody else. And so we didn't have to figure out ways to live together in terms of ways to respect each other. When you met someone who wasn't from the same region or subculture, blah, 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 as you could just, that person was weird and you could just avoid them. You didn't have to figure out ways to live together. We're a disrespectful society. We're a society of jerks. And if you don't believe me, just look on social media. I mean, it's worse on social media, but when you live overseas, you realize, wow, Americans are jerks. And we have this whole society based on jerkiness. It's not just a feeling of exclusion. It's the fact that we just, spit on people. The fact that, I don't know, like, I live in San Francisco with all these homeless people, tons of homeless people. And then a lot of people, like a lot of lefties will like march in favor of the homeless people. But when there's actually like a homeless woman lugging her like chair up the stairs at the BART, because the escalator's out and she's lugging her chair up the stairs, and absolutely no one, all these people are like so leftist and they'll walk past her and nobody helps her drag her chair up the stairs. So I'm like, hey, let me carry that up the stairs for you. It's like people don't even see other people in this society. And we treat service people so bad. We treat the people at the drive-through at the McDonald's like crap.
They treat us like crap.
They treat us like crap too. Yes, everyone. It's a bad equilibrium.
Because everyone's a jerk, right?
Everyone's a jerk to everybody. Like people are a jerk on public
but
transit.
That's not really something that the woke says. So you can't really say the woke's right about that because they don't say that. So what's one of the problems that they point out that's right, that they say, right? Because they're part of the jerk culture too, because they're jerks too.
Right. When I'm just thinking of, so when I think of the woke people, I'm not thinking of the random people with anime pictures on Twitter that I see or Tumblr, which I wasn't even on.
Right.
I'm thinking of my friends, right, who got into the woke stuff. I'm thinking of my friends who went to protest marches and these are mostly educated people. Mm-hmm. These are, younger people and millennials. And that's who I'm thinking about. The people I saw in my life who I knew from before, and then they got into the woke stuff, and why did they? And this doesn't describe all of them. I think some people, frankly, were just, sort of bored, educated white people with no problems who were looking for a crusade.
Mhm.
And then, this is a very long tradition in American society, of sort of white, like from the progressive movement, whatever, white people looking for some sort of social reform to make. I think that's good, although it can get stupid at times. But I think it's a good tendency to have this reformist, thing, and it comes from Protestantism. And But I think that a lot of people I knew who got really into the wokeness stuff, who were not, performative or not just looking for a cause to jump onto, had lots of reasons. Like people were just jerks. Like my one friend is disabled. She's a white woman, but she's in a wheelchair, and we went to New York City, and while we were hanging out in 2 days, two people shoved her for no reason, just walked up and shoved her, on whatever, like, and it just this, and people, general jerkiness in America. And she got very much into the protest stuff, and then she was a grad student and got canceled by her radical students, and then got out of the woke stuff. And to some degree, it's this natural, like, a lot of the problems with wokeness are going to be fixed naturally when people just realize, okay, this is stupid. Like, and I think you guys are part of that, on this podcast, just saying, like, look, guys, this is stupid, stop. And then once people get that off their chest, they have this angry energy toward a world of like status inequality, where their boss, like, bossed them around, or people were jerks to them, and wherever, at work, anywhere. And then they get this off their chest in this big 7-year long shout fest.
Mhm.
Right, we had the big 7-year long shout fest, and I think we had one of those in the late 60s and early 70s. We had another big sort of explosion. Good things came out of that, but a lot of silly shit came out of that we had to spend years sort of backlashing against, and sort of stuffing back in the box. And I'm just too optimistic. I think that liberal society will correct itself. We have these explosions, which a lot of stupid stuff comes out, but people get stuff off their chest, and at the end of the day, they go through the rest of their lives feeling, well, you know what, I stood up and I yelled about the stuff that I had a problem with, and people paid attention to me, and then it's done.
Yeah, I'm self-assessing and thinking maybe you're right, because I probably would have taken your friend's parking space, especially if it was after a certain time. And I know that I do that. So I'm sitting here now like, how have I been a jerk? And that
I can give you some ways you've been a jerk, but here's the problem with that, though.
No,
he's totally right, except he made a good point to catch the point. When I lived out of the country, right, I really noticed you can go to Canada, you can go to these other countries. So the problem is, if America's generally has this cover of jerkiness, right, we're cloaked in it, but if we don't leave, then it evens out, right? Because we're not comparing it to Canada or Japan, because we're not there. So among us, we see the people who are really uber jerks as jerks, not realizing that on a global scale, the jerkiness in us is higher, right? So that's why I say it's not that he's wrong. I just think that that's a little different from the wokeness, because when you look at it, with American lenses, we're looking at each other as opposed to looking at the difference. Like I can give you a Japan story. Well, he's right, so makes us look bad. So I went to Japan, and I was lost in the subway, and I needed help, and so I go to this young guy, and I'm trying to through the language barrier, look for a station. I show him on the map what I'm looking for, and he gives me this one moment. So he leaves, right? So he goes away. My wife and I are standing there. He's gone for a couple minutes. I was like, oh, he probably it's like New York. He probably like, I don't have time for you. Went away, and he comes back running, out of breath. He's like breathing. He starts to talk, and basically he didn't know where I was going, and so it just said I didn't know. He went to find out, and now he's like, follow me so he can take me where I needed to go. Fine, Noah, but Americans aren't just gonna. They're just not, right? Okay, we're not gonna do it.
We can't be that good. Like we're not gonna reach that level.
It's not gonna happen. But among us, the wokes is different, because the woke people are jerks too. So when they talk about stuff and they want to fix it, our complaint here is usually, well, you're not fixing anything, you're lying, right? So you're in San Francisco, let's talk about that. You know, homelessness and housing, things of that nature. We're in New York. They claim, here's a woke thing, they claim that, see, the system, they talk about race, but then they just say when you can get them to talk about class, they'll talk about, well, these elites do all this and the poor can't get anything, so the regular people got, like in New York, they were fighting rent control, right? During COVID, they're like, you can't raise rents. So every landlord is not some mogul. Everybody's not Trump. So the immigrant or the poor family who bought a 3 flat and suffered through to rent the other 2, and now that's their nest egg. Now they're tenants who are still at work, just like, well, I'm not paying rent because it's COVID. So now they can't pay their mortgage, and in these people protesting mind, that old lady is Donald Trump. Well, why should they have to pay rent, right? So this is one of the things we can use that as an example. So the intent might be good. Well, New York is getting too expensive. We are pricing people out of housing. But the answer is nobody should ever pay rent. That won't go bad, right? You say, but what about small landlords? Because they're not one. They're like, they're no small landlords. What are you talking about? Every landlord is the evil Donald Trump. They're just Donald Trump in different race, different political background, but they have the same views. They'll be okay.
Giant corporation,
or they'll say, just don't pay your mortgage. They'll be fine. We don't like Wells Fargo anyway. But unlike the tenant or the landlord, Wells Fargo will say, okay, it's COVID, don't pay it. But I'm adding it up with interest. And the day that the government say, go back to normal, they're like, here's your $18,000 bill and I need it by Tuesday. So that's one of the many, you know, we can do criminal justice and anything else. So that's kind of how I look at what they say might have a little bit of validity to it, but when you think it through, not so much.
Right. No, yeah, absolutely. I know. I think you're absolutely right. Like I deal with these people all the time in San Francisco, and they're absolutely crazy. But the tide is turning. Like I watched over the last decade, I watched the YIMBY movement rise up, and people say, give us housing, and then the leftists would always just find one reason or another to oppose them, because in one, what's really going on is the leftists are the first wave gentrifiers,
right?
And then they don't want, they were happy with the gentrification they did,
right?
But they don't want to be necessarily in a more like diverse, inclusive city. They don't want poor people living next to them.
Right.
And so they come up with any and all leftist sounding reason why that shouldn't happen. And you have all these pictures of people in the Bay Area with or elsewhere in like liberal towns across America with in this house, we believe Black Lives Matter, love is love, right, blah, blah, blah. The whole rainbow flag sign. Right. And next to that, it's like, no housing development in this neighborhood. And people just started taking pictures of these signs. There's like dozens of these pictures you can see, and that's what's going on. They're using leftist ideas as an excuse to just not have any poor people live next to them, right? Well, and there's some racism involved here, although it's not always like you expect. There's been there's Asian people in Cupertino who don't want Hispanic people from San Jose living near them, and so that was a big fight. And so, but it's just anyway. Yes. So
I want to go to Will, but the last thing that's weird about this is what it is. A great example would be the whole dust up between DeSantis and the Republican governor sending people around. Whatever you think about that, it's the same. It's like they will say what's best, and they might be right. These people can't just be homeless. You can't have homeless people living on the street, house them somewhere, as long as it's not where I live. So they'll say, so in New York, we had an argument. So people would be like living on the Lower East Side, saying, you got homeless people all over the city, put them in hotels, like the one on the Upper West Side, right? And so then the people on the Upper West Side would come and protest, like, get these people out. So then they lose them in court, they move them out, and then they put them in the Lower East Side, and then the same people say, we have to house them. I'm like, no, not over here. Right. So it's the same thing that happened there. Yes. What's the big deal with immigrants coming here? They need a place to stay. They're struggling. We should love them all. You can put them up in Texas and Florida. Whoa, what do you mean you send them to Martha's Vineyard? That's not what I meant. Put those people in a military base. Will?
Yeah, I mean, that's actually the exact example I was going to use a couple minutes ago. I mean, so Martha's Vineyard, I mean, I've been there once to party. It's one of the best and nicest locations in the U.S. A good-sized island. I mean, about what 150,000 people there, you guys would say, during the summer. And they sent them, and obviously it was a stunt by DeSantis, but there's nothing inherently dishonorable about this. He said, look, their jobs up there. This is one of the richest parts of the country. These people are liberals. It's a sanctuary island. They'll welcome you. And of course, he's fucking around because he knows that his political opponents won't. But he sends these people who are actually nice guys. They're Venezuelan refugees from communism. This is a legitimate group of potential asylum seekers. They go to Martha's Vineyard, and there's a whole bunch of like, welcome our little brown brothers stuff for about 24 hours. And then the migrants are rounded up, they're lied to, they're put on trucks by armed soldiers, and they're sent to a military base on Cape Cod. And it's just, some people think this makes DeSantis look bad. Bro, no. This perfectly illustrates how every wine mom you've ever dated actually feels about a whole range of issues. And you can kind of go down that list of things that, Noah, you said. I've written down some of them. Homelessness, kind of moderate but real racism, the kind you still encounter, the YIMBY movement, I mean, social discomfort, migration, new building. I mean, the same people that say a lot of positive woke things and have the yard signs are going to oppose in practice every single one of these things. So I have a comment, then a question. But I mean, so first of all, it strikes me as a businessman on the center right who's not really sympathetic to any of this, honestly, just, an honorable opponent. But I mean, it strikes me that a lot of this gets into problems within the left, sort of. So, I mean, you have sincere leftist opinions as versus almost fake upper middle class leftist opinions on the one hand. I mean, it's very conventional to be progressive when it comes to sexuality, drug use, casually appreciating Black people and that sort of thing. So, I mean, you have the actual understanding of left of Keynes economic policy versus just sort of I have a sign on the one hand. And you also, I think, more poisonously have kind of the old Bernie left, which I have some respect for, the class-based left. Let's get all these homeless people in SRO, I mean, in housing, versus kind of the modern, more woke left, which I see as a distraction from this, where class has been replaced as the issue category with like race, sex, and now we're just getting into bullshit like boutique gender identities, fatness, neuroatypicality. Like, I mean, I have ADHD, I would suppose. Like, I'm neuroatypical. I mean, most people.
Welcome to the revolution.
Most people you date in a city are bisexual. They're members of the LGBT community. So, like, we can now assign ourselves these, and guys are like lifting their eyebrows. We can now assign ourselves these revolutionary made-up identities, and this is becoming a real issue on the left. Like, I actually was a leader for Occupy in Chicago when I believe the class-based stuff. This is about 10 years ago. And when I saw the left couldn't get anything done, I went and got a job that required a tie. But I mean, everything that we proposed was broken down across these schismatic lines. This is really when it began, the fall of Occupy. So we would say, we want to put together a statement on student loan forgiveness. And people would say, well, why don't we have a Black panel that works on part of it? What about a Black women's panel? What about a Black gay women's panel? And in the end, there would be 40 groups of people dressed like idiots sitting around in Grant Park, disagreeing with one another. And from what I hear reading, this is what happened to, student and SDS and so on in the 60s as well. Yeah. Anyway, you have
I was about to say that.
Yeah, exactly the same thing. They are all anathemizing each other. If it makes you feel better, this happens on the alt-right too. Like, are you racist enough? But I mean, I guess the point of what I'm saying is Martha's Vineyard illustrates some real patterns within the left. And this is why the woke solutions, quote unquote, often don't work, or they're often just surface nonsense from this side branch of the left. But I mean, I think that leads into a question that's really kind of for you as the guest as well as the panel. But what do you actually do about problems like homelessness? Is there a liberal solution for some of this stuff that the right's frankly not that good on? And what is it, if there is?
Well, we know what the solution to homelessness is. 90% of it. Yeah, George W. Bush started doing
build houses.
Yes, build houses.
Wild
build
stuff.
The houses, give them to the homeless people. And you don't even necessarily have to build them. You can just, find a bunch of houses somewhere. Give the homeless people houses. And then then that's where everything starts. You don't get them off drugs first. The drugs are a coping mechanism because, it's crazy stressful to live on the street. The drugs are, I would, if you put me on the street, I guarantee you I would do any drug people have because I'd be so just stressed out all the time out of my mind. I'd go
I'd
insane.
probably stay sober and try to get out of my box, honestly.
Yeah, it could call me
I spent a lot
crazy.
of time in the boxing gym and applying for jobs.
Okay.
But no, go on.
You know what? There's this guy on Twitter I really like. He's pretty liberal. His name's Brandon Bradford. He's like the most sensible guy on Twitter. You've met him, right?
Well, did you?
Yeah, I've argued with him a bunch of times.
Yeah,
I don't
yeah,
know. I have no problem with Brandon. I don't know if I
And so
describe him as the most
Brandon wrote a
sensible
tweet.
cat on
We
Twitter.
tried to get.
Brandon wrote a tweet about homelessness. He said, if you started out homeless tomorrow with like no assets, no connections, just you on the street, how would you get out of that? And there were some good answers. There are ways that you could eventually get out, but it's just so like they were all low probability shots. There were things that would take a long time. And just if you imagine the stress that you'd go through in the meantime of carrying out any of the ideas that were said in response to his tweet.
If I could honestly answer that, if I had my IQ, I mean, I would panhandle for one day. The one time I've done that, I made $80. I mean, I would walk to the thrift store, buy a suit, and I'd walk around to fast food places and apply for jobs as a shift supervisor. I'd sleep in a church, contact any church, ask you and sleep in the basement for 2 weeks. Many of my boys have done that in the rave scene. So I mean, like, I do think there's that's seriously a fact. Like, if you are in
the
another
rave
city,
scene.
no, but like, I knew a bunch.
Yes.
Of
All right. Okay. You're right. It's gonna be hard if you get the shift supervisor job, you're okay. But the thing is that they're gonna make you write an address, and when you're like, I'm homeless.
You would give the address of the church. Do you have any friends in the world? I mean, there are.
No, you're not allowed to have friends. That's part of his scenario.
Well,
the church.
I think
you'd have to rely on the church.
Yes, but like every level you go through making this more unrealistic. So like maybe you don't apply for supervisor, just any job. But I mean, like if you said and you're blind, that would make it even more difficult. Not to like continue the conversation, but like But so like if you're in a situation where you're homeless, you're kicked out of a house by your mother or your father. This is most young students or something I've known who've spent some time on the streets.
Oh, yeah, they're fine. They're all okay. No, it's the older homeless people who are like 35 years old, not doing well economically, and then just get, booted from their apartment because it's getting converted to a condo or something, have nowhere to go. And then they just end up, saying, I'll just sleep on the street for a little while, and a little while turns into the rest of their life. And that's like, if you look at where homeless people in San Francisco come from, people think, oh, they move here because it's such a great place to be homeless. Well, something like 75% of San Francisco homeless people grew up in San Francisco. They're from here. It's just, our rent got so bad, they didn't have a place to live. Give these people houses, like the benefit of a safe place to sleep, like a safe, warm place to sleep. That's like basic, like every rabbit, every cat, every creature in this world knows the benefit of a warm, safe place to sleep. And so you just give people houses. The housing first thing just lowers homelessness so fast, and it's so cheap compared to everything else.
Well, how do they stay there?
What do you mean? How do they?
So when you say give them a house,
they
have bills, lights, cable, water. I mean, how do they then stay there? We give them that too?
Yeah, sure.
And who pays for it?
Government. Yeah. Just taxes.
Well, we do. I mean, like, we asked Noah for a good liberal solution. I mean, obviously, someone's gonna have to fund it.
I'm spending all my money on rabbits. I could, maybe I could spend some money on human beings.
He could pay for one human.
Fuck humans. Rabbits are better.
Yeah, rabbits. I don't know. They're cute, but no. There's this. This is the thing about being a liberal, right? That there's this deep liberal desire to take any any person who's downtrodden, down and out, and uplift them as much as you can, flip the status relations of society. And so in terms of pets, I want to take the pet that's most downtrodden and say, this is the best pet. I want to do that too.
Well, let me ask you this, Noah. So do
you think rabbits are the most downtrodden pet?
Yeah, man. People think they're hamburgers.
Oh yeah. I mean, they're tasty, but I mean, like, what about rats as a pet?
Tasty. It tastes like stale deer, man.
That's not a pet.
I know someone who had a pet rat.
I know many people have had pet rats. I think the rat is
pet
probably
rats
the most...
are fun. They die in 2 years.
You mean like the New York rat?
No, well, I mean, so first of all, It's like the old joke about not eating squab in a city restaurant because I know where you got them pigeons.
Right.
I mean, like, of course, a rat is a rat at some level, but I've had friends that have pet rats. They get really fat on your shoulder.
The rats
They
we use for
do.
pets are from lab rats, and we've been breeding lab rats for 200 rat generations to be smart so they can run through mazes and nice so they won't bite the research assistant. And so they're just the smartest, nicest little rodent.
So not New York rats.
Not
I would
New
bet
York
a
rat.
New York rat is smarter than a lab rat in some
It's
way.
street
Like,
smart. That's different.
There's
It's
a
street
brutal
smart.
reality to
It's
selection
street
in the
smart.
real world too.
But Will, that's a street smart rat. It's not the same thing
Yeah.
as an academic rat, right?
Right.
So their
Yeah.
intellect is different. So they're different kind of
Professor
rats.
Rat.
So they're both smart, but they're different smart, and you don't want both of them in your house.
It's like young
So-
Jeezy versus Jason
Right.
Stanley.
So one might
kinda.
be smarter, but you don't want them both in your house. I want the academic rat in my house, even
Right.
though the street rat might be smarter. He probably definitely better at math.
Yeah. You know,
But
all
do
the
I
Pete's
want him
Rat
in my
videos
house?
are staged, right?
He taking
It's all
over my
staged.
space.
And I think I prefer a white rat. While we're saying it,
Of course, you'd prefer
I
a
think they're
white
nicer.
rat. I don't know. I enjoy rats, but I
Going
mean,
down
my
the
pets
rat
are a
hole.
cat and a dog. Very conventional, very vanilla.
Can I
Anyway,
ask
We're
Noah?
talking about pet rats.
Can I?
That's where this podcast went.
I
That's
tell you,
great.
I told you it was going to be ended. Can I ask my question though?
Yeah.
Even if I gave the left, this was always been my concern. We can argue over the details. But if I say to the left, maybe not you, but the people you know, right, who think this way, we give them the house, give them whatever you want, whatever money you want, open checkbook, do whatever you want to do with the homeless. But those, we do know there's a percentage who are, violent, who are schizophrenic, whose drug use has gone too far, and they can't all that kind of stuff.
Broke their brain.
When they get to a certain point, can I lock them up? Are they going to say yes? Because when I ask them, they say no. Find another program for another program.
So, like I said, you can deal with 90%. That's a number I made up.
Right,
You can deal with a very large percent
majority.
of homeless people by giving them houses.
Yep.
And then they get on their feet and then they leave the house. And then
we just shoot the rest of them, right?
The others, nobody on the left has any idea for how to deal with them. The answer in all other countries is compulsory commitment to a mental institution.
Yeah, they can't be on the street.
And we stopped that because of the movie One Flew Over the Cuckoo's Nest. And we, yes, it is abusive. Like they will get raped. Some people will get raped in those places. Like once you give, care workers, you have these care workers who are actually just poor people who you give them these people who are often difficult, like crazy people are often difficult, and you just let, and nobody's supervising what you do with them. And some abuses are going to happen sometimes. And that's a hard problem. I don't know how to solve that. I know kicking people out just letting people live on the street is not good for them.
It's not an option.
But
they still get abused, but then they also abuse other people.
Right, exactly.
Yeah, as a leader, whether you're a liberal or
they're getting raped on the street too.
Noah said it
I don't
better.
know how we got
As
from
a
rats
leader,
to
whether
rape,
you're left
but
or
okay.
right, you can't have people sleeping on the street in refrigerator cartons. That's
No.
not an option when it comes to humane treatment. So you have to talk about the other options.
Yeah. But also, there is, in San Francisco, cynically speaking, there is an element of old rich people trying to harass new rich people by allowing lots of homelessness in their neighborhoods. Harass the
Crazy.
of the rich people who live in Diamond Heights, who are just rich old real estate people from the old San Francisco, trying to kick the tech people out of San Francisco by not doing anything about homelessness and hoping that the tech people get disgusted enough to leave. There's nothing more dysfunctional in San Francisco politics in this country. Like this is a screwed up city. In fact, it always has been. If you read, Tom Wolfe wrote this kind of funny essay called "Mowing the Flat Catchers."
Oh, right. I heard about it.
That's about San Francisco politics. It has always been ridiculous and silly. And anyway, but so San Francisco's screwed. But nationally, we have a good idea of what to do about homelessness, and Houston's doing it. Houston solved its homelessness problem. And, Texas often solves problems that blue states refuse to solve. So, I'm from Texas, so I have a bias there. But yeah, like Texas is building out renewable energy when the blue state people say, oh no, we can't have it taking up our open space. We can't have that solar plant here. It's ugly. And then like the Texas is just like, build it. We can make some money off it. Like,
capitalism,
and they win. Yeah, capitalism wins. but yeah, so like, but all right, so let me can I shift gears here and defend some of wokeness a little bit?
sure.
Because all right,
They know we don't.
right. When I was this is in like 2008, my friend who was in the movie industry was telling me how everybody knew that Harvey Weinstein made actresses fuck him. Am I allowed to say that on this podcast?
You already did.
All right. For parts in movies.
Right.
You know, it was obvious, like, you know, classic sexual harassment shit.
Mm-hmm.
And he said everybody knew this. No one will do anything about it because he's Harvey Weinstein, who could take him on. Right? Now he's in jail. And that the world changed in a way. And so when you saw the Me Too movement, there was some dumb stuff associated with that. You saw Aziz Ansari, like some girl who thought he was bad at sex, just wrote this like thing, like not saying that he raped her, but just sort of implying that she didn't feel good about it, so it was bad, and he got sort of canceled for a while. And then you know, of course, people probably a little more willing to cancel an Indian guy for this, but it was unfair, it was bad. But then overall, you just see sexual harassment go way down, like complaints of sexual harassment are going way down. And it's not because people are now more scared to complain than before. It's because like sexual harassment is actually going down. And this is what I was talking about, you know, about women coming into into management and coming into the workforce and sort of being economically equal, but still dealing with a lot of this bro culture. I know this woman who wrote Susan Fowler, now Susan Rigetti. She wrote a like a big thing about Uber. She was at Uber and she was like doing a really good job as a manager at Uber. And guys just kept trying to talk about sex to her at work. They kept trying to like talk about their sex lives, ask her about her sex, just incessantly talking about sex to her. And it just creeped her out. And then, and so she wrote this big, like angry rant and then quit the company. And then it got to be a big thing. And I understand that because, you know, I have friends who are women working in tech, finance, wherever. And they're like, why are these guys always trying to like talk to me about sex at work? And, you know, it's weird. And now that mostly stopped because of Me Too. Guys are like, okay, I guess I can't do that. And complaints of sexual harassment went way down. And I think that, you know, a lot of, I can't say all women, I can't speak for all women, but women I know who are sort of in the tech industry say they feel more comfortable now because of that. So yes, wokeness released a bunch of stupid into our society, but it also did some good stuff. And I think that's a very good thing. Harvey Weinstein, this guy who, you know, like 15 years ago, people thought no one could touch this guy. Now he's in jail and the world changed. So that's good.
Okay. So now do gender identity and race.
Gender identity and race. I mean, okay, so I'll do a race one. I'll do a race one. I figured
you would. Because
Okay,
you can't do gender identity.
I haven't followed it enough. Like I don't know about it. Like, and I'm, you know, and like attempting to talk about that without having really followed it is going to get me canceled really quick.
That could do.
I'm going to get canceled for anything I say about gender identity just out of ignorance because I don't know what I'm talking about.
So let's do the easy one. Go ahead, give me
let's do the easy one, race. So, okay, so I have a friend, she's Chinese American, came here and she was like 3 or 4.
You're already off. Race to black people only means blacks. Right, Shamika?
Correct. We don't do people
he
of
said
color.
Chinese American. We're already mad. Nope.
Yeah.
Where's my sign? The sign says Black Lives Matter, not Asian Lives Matter. Get it
Fair
right.
Exactly.
Fair enough.
But
There
we're
was
gonna hold our
Asian
peace.
hate.
Go on.
That
Tell
was
us
the thing.
about your friend.
Okay, so my friend, she you know, she always liked you know, acting. She's like a data scientist, whatever. She always liked acting. You know, she would act on stage, do improv, stuff like that. She never wanted to make a career out of it, but she enjoyed it, and she always thought, well, you know, there's no way I ever could make a career out of it because nobody wants to put Asian people in the movies. And she didn't like sit there and think I hate it, I am so mad. You know, she just sort of assumed that and went into something else. She's like, okay, economics, that's the thing I can do. You know, she did that. And then we went to see this showing, like this special early showing of the movie Crazy Rich Asians, which was an okay movie. I forget everything that happened.
Right.
It was an okay movie. It was not bad, whatever. But it was the sort of the first American movie with this all Asian cast, even though it was about Singapore or whatever. But we went there, and she just broke down crying in the middle of the movie, and she just like was sobbing at this movie. And she said, I never thought I'd see people like me on screen, she said. And I didn't argue. I was like, well, I could name. No, I didn't argue, because it was obviously important for her. It was, emotionally powerful for her. She is not a really woke person. She got very mad at BLM protests for disturbing her neighborhood. She's kind of conservative. I'm going to be honest. Like she's pretty conservative person herself, and got people mad at her for some white guy at her company, at her old company, like got mad at her and corrected her for saying Latino instead of Latinx. And so anyway, but here she was at this movie, just sort of like sobbing, because she like, this was a big deal for her. She thought this would never happen, and it did happen. And I thought, okay, well, you know what? There's no criticism of that I can make. I could not deny you that. And the world changed a little bit.
Well, I got to admit, just because it made me laugh when you said she tried to do improv, but didn't think because she was trying to do it. And then we went to this movie, and in my mind, I'm like, and then 2020 happened, and she was nominated for an Academy Award. Like the whole thing shifted. But I don't know if I would say that movie only got made because of the uproar and the turmoil and whatever has happened after that. But okay, Shamika, you got any comments on that?
No. I've seen Asians in movies for a long time.
But but the whole cast though. The whole cast.
You're not wrong. There has been some.
I like the movie too, actually. But so yeah, I mean, I guess if it meant something to her, then
but don't you think that's a good trade-off for the billions of dollars we lost and the lives we lost in the burnt police station?
Absolutely not.
No, Will.
That's the kind of unbiased question you see a lot on social media. Starting a poll or something.
Whatever
like that.
Do you mean?
But no, I do think that's a fair way of setting it up. So first of all, I mean, I agree with Shamika. You've seen Asians in movies for quite a while. I mean, I guess the glib comeback is this was them not doing karate. Like you moved
working at a store.
Yeah, but you moved outside that genre of like martial arts, travel to the Far East with Crazy Rich Asians. Right. But I think Charles's point, though, is pretty key. What's the trade-off? So it's actually just factually accurate. And people are very often, good faith conversations are important because people very often just bad faith bullshit each other. Like it is true that sexual harassment claims are down since Me Too. The flip side of that, though, is that the rate of male executives who say they'll mentor women at all is down by like half.
And people don't date anymore.
Other things like
right now, they're afraid to date.
Right.
Yeah. Well, that's
the problem.
I think that's a big
problem. What Charles said.
No, absolutely. Like right now, among single white and black men, the percentage of men that'll talk to women at all is 47. Like they will go up outside of a computer, like in a bar, athletic event, anything, dance, church, and talk to a woman is 40%, a little over 40. And guys will explicitly say that that's tied into Me Too. It sounds creepy, but it's tied into the sexual assault laws. We have sex while intoxicated, rape. I mean, it's tied into changes in culture, and there's studies of men.
Really law anywhere? Did anywhere make that law?
Yeah, well, that's something. The studies that find this specifically look at college campuses. That's a good correction. Yeah. So law is debatable. That is the policy at every college I'm familiar with. If you come forward after more than X number of alcoholic drinks and you say you had sex, you can pursue a sexual assault claim. And that has affected the college dating scene because the number of drinks is like 4. So, yeah. I mean,
congratulations, we beat hookup culture.
No, but I mean, that's
the conservatives won.
Well, but the funny thing is that it's the left that beat hookup culture. Yes. When you talk about like the rad femme left, it's very much like getting back to chaperonage. Mm-hmm. Like it's anti-porn, it's anti-sex after a bottle of wine. Mm-hmm. It's like demisexuality. The popular new identity is just you want to have sex for 3 dates. And it sounds like a joke, but that's essentially reality. You require.
Was it Andre Dworkin who said all penetration is rape?
Yeah, it was dworking.
in the 70s. That's the looniest shit I've ever heard. And
Sounds
there's
something a
someone out
man
there
would
who
say.
thinks that.
But no, it's absolutely, this is just pure horseshoe theory. Like hardcore rad films they sound like Jim Bakker. I mean, it's exactly the same thing. Like,
Yeah.
but at any rate, though, Me Too
So
also
yeah,
had
congratulations, conservatives. You won. It's like, you didn't win how you thought you were gonna win, but
You won.
you know,
well,
take the W.
I'm on the beefsteak and sex side of the right, to clarify. Like, I mean, there's that, and then
I don't
there's
mean
like
you. I mean,
the Amish sort of. I mean, and again, whatever. We're together on a lot of issues like gender ID, but I don't dislike women, and I find the extremes of feminism simply bizarre. But between like the incel hard right and the rad femmes and so on, you're in this weird position where like half of young people haven't had sex for like 2 years, where 50% of men won't talk to women. And you almost can't reproduce if 50% of your young men won't go up to young ladies and say hi. No one's encouraging guys to be creepy, but that too is a legacy of Me Too, of recent feminism. So the question is trade-offs. Like,
you're gonna have to bring back arranged marriage.
well, that's, I mean, to some extent, that's what the margins of the dating site culture get into. I mean, I've watched like businesswoman friends setting up for these sites, and it's like a day-long enterprise. You upload 15 pictures and you describe like your taste in pets. I mean, there's a site called Pet Life where you outline everything you're interested in sexually. I mean, and the computer, the algorithm then picks lovers for you. I mean, you're getting back to that. And a lot of people saying, I've heard so many female friends say this, that like the appropriate place to meet a man or a woman is online in an arranged setting. That it's quote unquote creepy if someone comes up to you in a nightclub and asks you to dance. And it's kind of like, bro, why are you there? I mean, like, what are you doing? We've become
Shouldn't you be in front of a computer?
I wouldn't want to meet somebody online. It bothers me when people come into my DM and they act like Twitter or Instagram is like a dating app. I'm offended then. Like, why are you even trying to get with me over social media?
Shamika, in their defense, they're not in North Carolina. How else are they going to do it?
Well, then that means you can't do it. Catch me when you see me put up a flyer that I'm going to be somewhere else. And if that's in your area, come out. Stop trying to meet me over social media. I don't like that.
Yeah, and ask, can I take you to dinner? I mean, it's not really, you can say yes or no, do it in a public place, but for the young men, there's nothing creepy at all about politely talking to women. That's how all relationships begin. Right. And by the way, the online shit is just as irritating for men. Like, more of them are probably for sale now than they were when I was better looking. But like, if you go into my inbox, it's all like, I'm trying to make special friend. And it's like, get these bitches, get them out of here. It's like 10 or 12 every morning. And like every guy with a job can say this. So like, I don't think that this is an improvement over going up to an attractive coworker and asking once or twice, you want to go get a coffee?
Whoa, coworker. Right. Whoa. You had me at going into a bar. You a coworker? No, we can't do coworkers. Then it's HR involved. We got to have a meeting. No, let's try a bar. Let's stick our toe in a bar.
Okay, cool. So you're actually more restrained about this than most people are. That's good, sure. But I mean, like the basic point is you can go talk to people. Like want to get dinner outside of work. Certainly if you're in a nightclub, whatever, it's not an issue. But 55% of men won't do that.
Sad.
Ever. Problematic. To steal something from the left.
Any last points you want to make or anything that we missed out on that you wanted to address?
Me?
Yeah, you're the guy. You're the man of the hour.
Right. Well, I want to tell you an anecdote.
I like those.
All right. So I have a friend who's
you got a lot of friends, by the way.
I do.
Cutting you
I have
off.
a lot of friends.
Man, do you have a lot of friends?
I'm an extrovert.
You have as many friends as Will has strange stories about, hook up and back of the page ads and stuff. But we won't get into that.
Right.
I don't have any stories about that.
No, remember when you were a pimp?
Okay.
Yeah, I was asked to apply for a job as a pimp once. That's a different story.
Nice.
Nice. I don't know if that's nice. You just said
what did you say
after Me Too, and you're saying nice.
I'll tell the story very briefly, and then I want to hear your story. But basically, I applied for it was an ad not on Backpage, but on just some regular job site. But it was like, I had posted a totally honest resume at one point that described all the things I'd done. Like I had been a canvas manager for a gay rights organization, traveling around the country and fighting people. So I had all these crazy jobs, and I just put them on there, just and was open about it, honest references. And I started getting all these interesting calls like, hey, do you want to do, X type of outreach in our office in another country and so on. And most of them are pretty funny. But one of them was a call from a company called North Loop Escorts. And they contacted me and they were like, we're a company that specializes in Russian and Polish princesses who we deliver to gentlemen. You seem like an interesting, potentially tough guy. We're looking for a clientele manager who's someone who can liaise between the girls and the clients, someone who can make sure there's no trouble from the client to the girl. You do some of the cyber stuff because I had a social media background. Would you be interested? And I talked to him seriously. The job paid 6 figures. It was an interesting job, but I didn't want to be a pimp. So I eventually started asking bullshit questions like, do I get a Cadillac? And they were just very much like, yo, you're not taking this seriously, click. So that's that story.
Can I have a cane?
Looking like Kramer from the Seinfeld episode, right? With the dream coat. I'm sorry. Noah, your friend.
Okay, the protests and riots, but mostly protests, a bit of riots in 2020 are the big break for a lot of people. That's when everything went crazy and the country burned and things like that. Mm-hmm. The country didn't burn. 25 people died and they were all just like drunk idiots who charged the cops and got shot. A couple neighborhoods in Minneapolis burned. Portland people acted up for a few months, but
we had a new country. We had a new
David
country.
Dorn.
What'd you say, Shamika?
Did we add David Dorn into that?
Right. Or the new country in Seattle?
I mean, they burnt down a police station in Minneapolis, like the old 3rd precinct. Like a historic police station and they burnt to the ground.
They did burn the precinct station.
One precinct, Will. Stop
One precinct station. It's a big country. This is like when you look at, when I was a kid, we had the LA riot, and the LA riot killed like 3 times as many people as the entire months-long Floyd protest in the whole country, and burned like twice as much, or 3 times as much. Some large multiple. It burned a lot more, and it killed a lot more people in just one city in like 1 week. I remember just like watching that on TV as like a little kid. And we're, so, but here's the anecdote I wanted to tell. I have a friend who's like a law professor, used to be an economist. That's where I get all these friends, of course. And so then, I was talking to her about a year afterwards, and she had gone in the protests and like multiple times in New York City protested, with after the Floyd shooting or Floyd killing. And she said nobody wants to admit that it was COVID, but it was COVID, because that is how liberal kids did their anti-lockdown protest, by going out and burning and smashing, because everyone was just nuts. And that's why you had these insane white kids in all these cities like pulling down random statues of like Ulysses S. Grant and like doing dumb shit and burning down things, which is of course bad. That's bad, but lockdown made people nuts. And so let's remember that this wave of protests and craziness happened right after the craziest like pandemic related episode in our entire history. Like, no, we've had pandemics before. We never had a countrywide lockdown for 2 months or 3 months before, where you were just stuck in your house for 3 months. People went nuts, and it was COVID, and nothing like that has happened since. And I confidently predict that nothing like that will happen again. Unless there's like some sort of nuclear war or like other major disaster, that nothing like that will happen again within the next 30 years.
All right.
It was a one-off, I think.
Well, I see Shamika's pencil favors, but we're going to have to leave it there. He is Noah Smith. Check out the Substack Noahpinion, even though he has plenty of opinions. And check out his blog on economics. Thank you, Noah, for joining us.
Thanks for having me on.
It was great having you.
country to save. God bless the US of A, land of the free and the home of the brave. God get all of the praise. I got a country to save, cause I'm Patriot J and I'm saving the day.